Luke, what happened? I get that question all the time, especially when people hear that I've been ejected from a vehicle. So, where it all started was on a trip to a family reunion with my younger sister and my grandmother and grandfather. We call them Granny and Gramps. And they were taking us to a family reunion in Washington State. We were coming from Billings, Montana. That's where I live now and have grown up. And we were headed over across the state, over the top of Idaho and into Washington. And right before we hit the Washington border, right before we hit the Idaho border, on the west side of Montana, we're going through the mountains. And in that stretch of interstate, you've got two lanes headed west and two lanes headed east, winding through the mountains with a big ravine in between the two sides. And 6 to 8 foot concrete barriers on either side of the road. So in this particular stretch, we were going around a curve. Mountain was on the right, barrier on the left, ravine next set of road. And we were going through a corner, passing the semi, going 65, 75 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, there's a mattress in the road. We don't see it until we come around the corner to the right vantage point, and there it is. Nowhere to go, concrete barrier on the left, semi on the right, nowhere for the semi to go because there's literally a mountain right there. No shoulder, nothing like that. And so we have no choice but to hit it. You can't stop on a dime going that speed. My Gramps, who was driving, had no choice but to hit it. So we hit the mattress. It ends up locking up our steering. We think it wedged up into the wheel well, locked up the steering. We came out of the corner and on a straightaway, and with the steering cocked to going right head guiding us right straight into the trailer of the semi. So my Gramps was fighting it, and all of a sudden the mattress broke free. And the overcorrection, the force he was wrenching on that wheel to get us away from going under the trailer caused us to go hard left into the concrete barrier. So we hit the concrete barrier, went up the side of it, and spun 2.5 times like a football. From the account of the semi driver who witnessed the whole accident, and from what Highway Patrol and all them thought, they think that at some point all the glass broke. Maybe we landed at some point. Kind of sounded like maybe we landed, it broke, after the first spin. But somewhere in there, I ended up going out, they think, out the passenger side side window. We were in a Dodge minivan, and I was in the middle bench seat. So I went out the side window on the passenger side is the thought after it broke, and rolled on the pavement as the car proceeded to go up the side of the barrier again and over the top of me as I was rolling on the pavement like a gymnast. And that's the account of the driver, of the semi driver. I was wearing my seatbelt. I ended up dislocating my left shoulder, and the friction of the seatbelt burned through my shirt and burned my skin right where it was. Literally like singed my shirt, and I had no shirt across my lap belt, part of my lap belt, but mostly all right on my chest strap. So I was ejected, car landed on its top and slid in front of me. I ended up miraculously landing on my feet, again, like a gymnast. I was 10 years old at the time. And I had been taking gymnastics, which probably was another thing that saved my life. And so fully conscious, there I am standing in the middle of this interstate. Van is upside down in front of me. I can still remember the wheels spinning. It's cocked sideways on its roof, taking up both lanes of traffic. And I remember walking towards the van, wheels still spinning, and not really sure what's going on. I remember looking down at my left shoulder and not really seeing that there was basically my shirt was gone. But I could see my shoulder and it was bleeding. And I remember thinking, darn it, this was my favorite shirt. I had just gotten back from a church camp, and the shirt I was wearing was my new favorite shirt. It was a camp shirt, and all my friends from camp had signed it. And the shorts I were wearing were Hunter's orange cargo shorts, and they were my favorite shorts as well. And I remember thinking, man, my favorite shirt and my favorite shorts are probably ruined. Didn't really pay attention, but I just kind of assumed if I, given, I don't know, it just seemed like common sense that my shorts were going to be toast or bloody at least. That's what I remember thinking. Anyway, so I start walking towards the van slowly and trying to take it all in. And I remember my grandmother getting out of the van. Again, it's upside down. She was on, and so driver's side is facing me, passenger side is facing away. And I remember her head just popping up, looking around, screaming my name, Luke, 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 where are you? And pale lady, white hair. And then when she locked eyes on me, her face went even whiter than it already was. She looked like she had seen a ghost. And that I'll never forget that. And she was horrified at what she saw. And I didn't understand it at the time because I thought I'd just torn my shirt a little bit and cut my shoulder. What I came to learn later on was there was basically just strips of what was the remnants of my shirt left on. Same with my shorts. I wasn't wearing shoes during the accident. I had taken them off for a nap beforehand and had just woken up right when all the drama happened with the accident. I remember waking up and sitting up and feeling my shoulder belt come up to my shoulder, and my granny and my gramps were yelling. I don't remember seeing outside. I remember the shadow of the semi, and I remember seeing the concrete barrier, and also the concrete barrier ended, and that must be when we hit the straight stretch, and seeing it through the windshield, and that's when everything happened, and it was just black and gray and brown and all these different colors spinning, and there I was standing in the interstate looking at the van. So she rushed over to me, and then started looking for my sister, who was still in the car hanging upside down, and looking for my gramps, who was still in the car as well, and he was trapped. The van had collapsed primarily on the driver's side, and he was a pretty big guy, and he was trapped in the vehicle. And Teresa was asleep or had been knocked out while she was sleeping, so she probably was still asleep when it happened, and it took a little bit to wake her up. So maybe she was knocked out. We don't really know. But she got a little bit of a bump on her head. My grandmother broke some ribs. My grandfather ended up getting out with the help of other people out of the vehicle before EMT services arrived. And he had the roof had caved in and hit him in the head, and he had cut his head open to about the middle of his head, and I think he had 75 to 100 stitches in his head, and they think his elbow went out and drug on the pavement or on something because it was worn down, like ground down to the bone, and he had 150 stitches in his elbow. Now, with what I know now, I'm very positive he would have been classified as having a traumatic brain injury for sure, even a moderate one. But because he was never as sharp afterwards, like mentally, he was always extremely sharp, very successful in business and sales and things like that. And after that, he would have trouble coming up with words sometimes, and he had a variety of other health issues that surfaced after the accident. And I think that they were a lot of them were related to that. For me, I had the burn right from the seatbelt and the dislocated left shoulder. But by rolling on the pavement, I basically got what's called road rash, which is essentially second-degree burns, and that was from head to toe. Bottom of my feet, I destroyed the arch in my feet, lost most of the skin on the bottom of my feet. So those were all bandaged. I couldn't walk for a while until that healed up. Let's see what else. Oh, I sprained the whole left side of my body. Every muscle in the left side of my body I sprained. And had a major concussion that years later would be classified as a traumatic brain injury. Even though I didn't have a brain bleed or a coma or have to have brain surgery or anything like that, basically my brain didn't rewire itself properly, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But so they just classified it as a concussion. I was conscious. I did end up losing consciousness after things happened. I think it was just due to shock because I went into shock pretty much right away. I remember getting super cold and laying on the side of the road. And I mean, we blocked traffic. There was no way getting around us. And thankfully, since we were in the mountains, there was no cell reception. And this was back in 2001. So OnStar was really big, especially in the trucking industry. A service for when you're on the road for like emergency services, and you could subscribe to it. You probably remember it. Anyway, there was a couple of trucks that were equipped with OnStar, and they were able to activate to call OnStar and let them know of the accident and give coordinates on where we were at and things like that. And they were going to airlift me specifically to a hospital when they heard that I was ejected. But then EMTs showed up and saw me, and they decided to take me to the nearest hospital, which was Superior, Montana. Little, I think it was an 8 or 12 bed hospital. And we ended up receiving excellent care there. Kind of a long story with that. But anyway, kind of the backstory on that. But bottom line is we received good care there, stayed a few nights. And I remember when the ambulance showed up, they put me on a backboard. You know, being ejected from the vehicle. They thought, man, probably broke his neck, back, something. And then they were afraid of debris, which I ended up having a lot of debris, glass specifically, and I'm sure other things as well. But glass specifically, I ended up having lodged in my head, my forearm, elbow, knee, toes, feet, kind of a variety of different places, mostly on the left side as well. Anyway, so I remember getting on the backboard, and it was after the first time I lost consciousness, because I lost consciousness on the side of the road. When I went into shock, they started bringing me blankets. People started bringing me blankets and beach towels. I remember getting a big Mickey Mouse beach towel, and the lady just telling me I could keep it. And I was a very sweet lady. From what I don't know why I remember that, but anyway, she brought me this big beach towel. I think I don't know. I probably had a dozen blankets on me. People were just trying to keep me warm because they felt bad for me. But really, I was going into shock, and there was no way to get me warm. My body was in shock. And then I think I blacked out. I think I must have lost consciousness to that. I don't remember. And then the ambulance was there. They strapped me to the backboard. I think I lost consciousness again. Then I remember riding in the ambulance. Excuse me. And them telling me I had to keep my eyes open because they thought I had glass in my eyes and they didn't want me to close my eyes. But really, they just didn't want me to lose consciousness, I think. I mean, they were seriously concerned about the glass in my eyes, but I think it was mostly they thought that they wanted to keep me awake so I didn't die. Anyway, I remember getting laying on the table in the ER, and I remember them giving me shots of some sort. I met the ER doctor, before I passed out again, woke up in the x-ray room. And I remember, I remember them telling me, okay, you got to put on this robe. And I was very uncomfortable because I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, I have to take my clothes off. And they're like, well, son, you really don't have any clothes left. I'm like, okay, whatever. I was so out of it. Put that on. They did some x-rays, and then spent a couple nights in the hospital, all bandaged up and all that jazz. Anyway, so when that was the accident, and my parents drove across the state to pick us all up, because obviously the car was totaled. My granny and gramps were in no condition to drive. Me and my sister were too young, obviously, and definitely in no condition. So they came over, drove us home, and we began the recovery we began the recovery process. And it was long. I mean, really, it's kind of still going on in some ways. Obviously, a lot of psychological and emotional trauma for all of us, um, and a lot of physical stuff. Like I said, I couldn't really walk around very much because of my feet. They were all bandaged up, stitches and all sorts of stuff, bandages everywhere. Anyway, um, I remember resting, and I remember being laid up. So the accident happened August 15th, 2001. September 11th, 2001 happened. I remember where I was. I remember I was laying on the couch because I was still healing, still hurting. It still hurt to walk. But things were getting better, skin wise. I was starting to heal up. But I remember that happening. We watched it on TV. And I remember thinking that either the world was ending or my life was over or something, for two tragedies to happen within a month, for me to get in this bad accident and then for 9/11 to happen. I'm like, life's over. Like, what else can go wrong? When you're 10 years old, I guess that's sometimes where your mind goes. But so there was that. Recovered as best I could. Lots of like Epsom salt baths and whole wide variety of things we did for recovery. I ended up losing a lot of my schooling, primarily math. I had to start over with math. Lost some grammar, not as bad, grammar, spelling, that type of thing. But basically had to like relearn some things, school academic wise, and re-solidify a lot. And my parents looked at putting me back in school. That they were going to put me in special ed classes, and thankfully, my mother's a natural born teacher. Or educator. And she looked at me and said, knowing me as her son, she's like, I think we can get you better. And that ended up being a huge blessing to stay homeschooled. We had been homeschooling prior to this, but we decided to stay homeschooling. And that ended up being a huge benefit to me because then I wasn't being put into environments that were overstimulating my brain. I wasn't being put into very stressful environments. I wasn't being put into any environments where like physically I could be harmed because I was still neurologically, I was still very fragile. We didn't know, but years later we found out that was most likely the case. So I was angry at the mattress. I wasn't angry at the person who lost it because we didn't know who it was. So I was angry at the mattress. And I remember drawing pictures of like shooting or blowing up the mattress because of what had happened. And being homeschooled, you get pretty creative, or at least the parents get pretty creative with the education. And so I wanted to find a way that would help prevent accidents like mine from happening. And so we started researching the law on securing loads in the state of Montana. Come to find out, you only had to haul something or secure something if you were hauling it to the dump or landfill. And I decided I thought that should change. So my mom thought, wow, how great. This is going to be a great school project. We're going to learn how the Montana legislature works. This is going to be great. We'll make it, we'll research it and he'll be happy and understand how it works. Well, we researched it. Okay, well, this is the process on how a bill becomes a law. And, the next step is, you have to come up with the idea, and then you have to kind of write out a draft, and then you have to contact your local representative or senator. And if they agree, then they take you to the draft process, blah, 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 blah. And so I, like, basically at every stage, I was like, let's do that. So my mom's like, okay, he's still interested in it. Let's keep going. Got to the point where we contacted the senator, contacted the representative, and the senator took me seriously, surprisingly enough. I was 10 years old. I was 10, 11 years old, somewhere about in there. I think at that point, I was 11. So this would have been the following year in 2002, if I'm not mistaken. And and he took me seriously and was like, okay, I think you're right. I think that this should be a law, and your story's incredible. Let's meet and talk about it. So we talked about it, and he ended up supporting me and sponsoring the bill. And he sent me every piece of communication, every fax, email, primarily fax back then, but fax, email, written communications, everything, so that I could understand the process and what the work that went into it. And basically, he trained me and trained us as a family how to lobby for a bill. So long story short, I ended up going up that session. So we ended up like cramming it through because it was a legislative year for Montana. The Montana legislature meets every other year. And we ended up cramming it in and getting it sponsored and getting it written. And then we were off to Helena. So this is a little after, if I remember correctly, a little after a year after my accident. And I'm up in front of the House Transportation, or the Senate Transportation Committee, testifying as a proponent for my bill as an 11-year-old. And man, what an experience. So we learned a lot. It ended up not going anywhere. And we ended up spending the next 4 legislative sessions, 4 total, I should say, and almost 8 years, 7.5 years, something like that, working and lobbying to get this bill passed. And an incredible experience. So did that. That was a big part of my academics afterwards, into high school. Ended up getting that passed my junior year of high school is when it passed officially, and the governor signed it into law. I was able to be there for the ceremony, and it was a very cool experience. So did that. Was on swim team, captain the swim team a couple of years in a row. Was never very good, but worked my butt off. I worked hard. I loved it. And had some great coaching and great experience there. Found out later that constant repetition was actually good for my brain. The constant repetition for keeping equal balance of strength and motion for both sides with swimming, right? Different motions, ended up being really good for my brain. And most likely helped with I'm trying to think what the word is, but basically like developing extreme weakness or dysfunction on one side. So that was good. Anyway, so went through that, ended up blowing out my shoulder, the same shoulder I dislocated, and I'd have surgery. And during my recovery process, my coach left, and the team culture I had been a part of really disbanded. And so I decided to move on from swimming to something else. And about that time, I started working officially. I started working when I was 12, kind of under the table stuff and volunteer work, and then started working officially when I was 15. And so my surgery was when I was 16. So I really threw myself at work then. And went through school, had gotten caught back up academically, which was good. And got 2 years of college done by the time I graduated high school. So life seemingly going well, right? Ended up meeting my now wife. We started dating my senior year of high school, and got married when we were 21, and when I was 21 and she was 20. So I ended up finishing my bachelor's degree before we got married, though. I had spent 5 or 6 months at a bank. Thought, I'm going to work at a bank and work my way through a bank. I don't need a bachelor's degree. I've got an associate's. That's good enough. And I hated the banking experience. I just could not stand it. And so I decided to go back to school, finish my degree, and crammed in my last 2 years into 3 semesters. And I wanted to do it before I got married. So I graduated, and we got married a few months later. And then shortly after I got married, I'm trying to think which happened first. We got pregnant first. We got pregnant literally a month after we got married with our first son. And then about a month after that, I think I lost my job. And before we'd gotten married, both of our cars had broken down. We spent like almost every penny we had on our wedding. And we did the wedding kind of on the cheap too. So we spent, and honeymoon and stuff like that. So anyway, so we had no money, broken down cars, and baby on the way, and lost a job. Great way to start a marriage. But we made it work. Ended up, long story short, I ended up working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and that ended up being a fantastic experience. Lots and lots of work, but a fantastic experience. Started climbing the ranks there, and worked there for a few years. Trying to think, for about 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. Well, technically, I only worked there for about 2 years, but they kept me on as an employee for about a year after my neurological relapse happened. So I was working, climbed the ranks very quickly, became a manager of my own branch. And 2014, I had been in the ER 3 different times for stroke-like symptoms. Didn't really make a connection. Thought, I'm just stressed, or I was sick, or overreacting, whatever. Was working 80-hour weeks, so I thought I was stressed, which I was. And trying to balance a newborn son and, a 1-year-old and a wife, and climbing the corporate ladder. And we were contemplating a big move and promotion and all that. And anyway, so I'd been in the hospital, didn't think too much of it. End of September of 2014, I ended up having the worst pain of my life. Now, this wasn't the intensity of the pain was unusual, but the fact that I had pain was not. Because since the accident, I had dealt with, the whole way through, I had dealt with daily head pain, headaches, migraines. I had dealt with, alignment issues in my back, my neck, my spine, my hips, and that had been a constant battle to keep those in alignment and keep those muscles healthy and strong. Shoulder pain up until I had my surgery. After that felt a lot better, but for many years I had shoulder pain, and kind of a wide variety of other symptoms that I really didn't know that were a part of my head injury. I thought that they were just normal because they had seemingly been there forever. And some of them I thought were allergy reactions or histamine reactions, and they weren't. And anyway, just kind of a lot of crazy things. But this head pain was extreme. Like, it brought me to the floor. I'm crying on the kitchen floor right before work because the pain is so intense. I can feel, or I can see. It was like in a cartoon. The black curtain was closing, and I wasn't letting myself pass out. But it was like my body was trying to tell me, no, you need to black out right now, and I wouldn't let it. And I was crying. There was that. I was nauseous. I started vomiting. I developed extreme noise sensitivity, extreme light sensitivity. I mean, just all these things. So stayed home, fluke of a thing, right? Had nothing to do with the fact I had been in the ER 3 times that year for stroke-like symptoms. And long story short, I ended up trying to go back to work a couple different times. I ended up having extreme blurred vision. I couldn't even read like a stop sign when I'd be parked up next to it. Couldn't read it. So couldn't drive, couldn't read a computer screen. So somebody had to drive me everywhere I went. And I had extreme fatigue, couldn't stand for more than about 10 minutes without passing out or throwing up or falling over or whatever. And so something was obviously up. Got sent home multiple times, ended up getting put on a work, put on like a sick leave type thing. Talked to my neurologist. I'd had a neurologist all the way through from the accident, and talked with him, my general doctor, all these specialists. And basically over the next 2.5, 3 months through the end of the year, or close to it through December, we went to every doctor we could, every specialist appointment, tried every medication, every procedure outside of surgery, infusions and things like that. And there's actually sections of that time frame I do not remember, probably because I was so doped up on medication or in so much pain, I can't remember sections of that time. And the conclusion came to either it's all in your head and it's a psychological thing, or you're making it up, or it's an issue far beyond what we can do. So you need to go to Mayo. You got a referral to Mayo, And basically there was a wait list to get onto the wait list. And it was before I actually saw a doctor and had an answer to what was going on with me, and even an idea of what would need to happen going forward, would be anywhere from about 12 to 18 months. And that just did not work for me. I had a family to provide for during this time frame. We also found out we were pregnant with our second son. So I had a family, I had a wife, kids. We had dwindled through our savings, what little savings we had. And so it was crazy. It was a nightmare, complete nightmare. Thankfully, my parents were very supportive and were able to like help with childcare and like drive me to appointments. And my mom had been an advocate for me all these years, trying to help me figure out all my health stuff that we didn't know if it was related to the accident or not. No one could give us really answers. So she was very in tune with my health and was able to kind of continue being my advocate, which was good. And so we just kept going to, we tried everything we could. Like I said, got those, got kind of that diagnosis, I guess, if you will, of, hey, we don't know what to do with you. And so we took to researching, like, well, we got time to wait until Mayo can get us in. So let's research. So we took to researching and came to the conclusion that really what I was experiencing was symptoms of a traumatic brain injury. Even though my brain injury had been over a decade prior, it was like I was experiencing the symptoms directly after an accident. And I was experiencing the same symptoms, but heightened, and new symptoms as well. So we started looking for TBI clinics. Well, we found a TBI clinic locally. When was you're definitely a candidate. Everything you're saying lines exactly up with a traumatic brain injury. When was your accident? August 15th, 2001. Excuse me? 2001? Yeah. Oh, we can't help you. We only help people that have had an injury within the last 6 to 12 months. You're too far out. There's nothing we can do for you. There's nothing anybody can do for you. You can't heal a head injury that's that far out. Okay. So looking at that, we went, well, that sucks. But at least we know now that it's a traumatic brain injury. So we ended up finding a variety of different clinics, and the go-to seemed to be the one down in Texas. It's no longer in existence anymore, but that's not the point. The point is that it was the clinic at the time. So we called them up, gave them my stuff, and they're like, yeah, we can see you. This was on a Friday in the early December. And they said, we can see you Monday in Dallas, Texas. And this was like Friday afternoon, evening. And like logistically, we couldn't make it work because there was no direct flights. Like we couldn't even get flights, and we couldn't drive there in that time frame. And I couldn't have handled it anyway from a physical or neurological perspective. We're like, we can't physically get there in that time frame. So we went down 2 weeks later, which was still way faster than 12 to 18 months, the Mayo was saying. And we rushed all my medical records down there. And I remember, because a lot of the medical records were able to go down pretty quick because they were electronic. But I still have medical records that weren't electronic back from when I was a kid. And a lot of, back, because that transition, at least for us back up in Montana, that happened around, not right. I'm trying to think when it happened. I don't know exactly, I guess, but it was after my car accident. So I still had records that were paper, and just the paper records were like this tall of paper. And they showed up day of our appointment as we're waiting in the waiting room. FedEx dropped them off. And anyway, so the doctor went through them. Our appointment was delayed, but anyway, we ended up seeing the doctor late, but we saw him. And he's like, man, you've got a lot of stuff going on, but like, you seem to have lived like a pretty good life, with your law change and getting college done early and wife and kids and one on the way and blah, 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 career, all that. Like, you're good to go. Like, I'll have you in and out of here in a few days. Okay, cool. So he has me do some different tests, and walking tests and eye tests and balance and memory and physical touch and sensation and things like that. And he comes back in after analyzing all the results. And he had been pretty cheery when we first saw him. And then afterwards he came back in very, very serious. He looks at me and goes, "Dude, you are seriously messed up." And I remember like, okay, that's not a good sign. But anyway, and I remember my mom, she was all upset and started talking back to him. I'm like, "Mom, he's not talking about like my character. He's talking about me neurologically. Like, calm down, But we were emotional. So he starts telling me, he's like, "I thought given your life, you would be kind of an open shut case. Basically, what I've determined is that your brain has not rewired itself properly. And you've been experiencing basically a neurological relapse from your injury." And we're like, "Okay, well, what does that mean?" He's like, "Well, to put it in ultimate layman's terms, if your brain was a computer, it's blue screening." And I knew what that meant because I had dealt with computers. My granny and grams had bought us each grandkids a computer as part of our education, and we did a lot of our schooling on it. And we knew when it blue screen, we knew that there was like what we had to do to try and save it. And so I'd gone through that a couple times with computers and went, "Oh, that's not good." He goes, "No, it's not." He said, "Honestly, you came at the right time, because if you had waited any longer, given what I'm seeing with your medical history and what I'm seeing now, within the next 6 months, you would have been either a vegetable or dead, given your neurological state." Okay, cool. I'm glad I'm here too. So anyway, so we ended up, he did a few more tests, and one of the, to show me, because he hadn't told me any results when he had done some of the tests before. One of the tests that was very visual, that showed me like stuff was not right, or very tangible, I should say, was he had me lay down. I had my eyes closed, socks and shoes off, and he would touch a toe and ask me to tell him what toe and what foot. And I got 10 out of 10 wrong. And many of them were wrong toe, wrong foot. So my connectivity was completely screwed up. Not even like, "Oh yeah, I'm touching your pinky toe, but you got the next toe over." "Oh no, you thought it was this toe, but it was on this foot, but it was actually a different toe on a different foot." Like, that's messed up. So we went to work and we did a lot of therapies there and addressed nutrition and chemical balances and all sorts of stuff. And that started now really, that was end of 2014. So really over a 5-year journey now of looking at my health in a different way. And I ended up going to that clinic, or a similar clinic, because then I ended up transitioning to a different clinic a year and a half afterwards, because my team ended up leaving Texas and going to Colorado and starting their own. And so I ended up following them because they knew me best and they were treating me better than some of the other members of some of the other teams at this clinic in Dallas. Anyway, that's a story for another time. But they anyway, so similar care, really addressing the physical side of it, the chemical side, the neurological side, the emotional side, the spiritual side. I mean, we just were attacking it all over at every angle. And the type of clinic this was I should mention, is a functional neurology clinic. So the doctors that I was dealing with were all chiropractors, very advanced, high-level chiropractors, who were also board certified in neurology, and many of them had another specialty: nutrition, biomechanics, psychology, things like that. And it was kind of a wide gambit, so that we could attack things from every angle possible. And I went on a variety of different diets, craziest diets, or nutrition plans, all around like what my body was allergic to. My body we found out, was part of why I ended up having extreme vomiting and diarrhea and like gut issues, was my body like couldn't decide basically what it was allergic to. So it would be like allergic to this set of foods one day and then allergic to this set of foods the next day. And it was like switching. And so my diet changed a variety of times, but I ended up going down for a week to 2 weeks at a time. I think I made 18 or 19 trips over the course of 3 or 4 years pretty front end loaded, going about every 60 days initially, and then slowly stretching it out further and further. And just, I mean, I think 2015, I think I spent close to 3 months out of that year in Dallas, going through therapy. So a lot of work, a lot of time to get me neurologically healthy. So we did a lot of work on that. Like I said, working on the nutrition side of it, working on some weight loss, and a whole variety of things. And now, with where we're at now, my primary doctor is now back in Dallas, and she's awesome. And we are focusing on the nutrition and the weight loss side of it, because no matter what I've tried so far, weight loss has been a very difficult thing for me. I've had it. I've lost weight, but I still need to lose more. So that's kind of the next phase. We got my testosterone figured out because we found out I had damage to my pituitary. Anyway, just a whole wide gambit of things. We did some crazy therapies, aromatherapy. They had the spinny, I call it the spinny chair, or the astronaut chair. You spin in different pitches and yaws, and it stimulates different parts of the brain, sound and light and electrotherapy and lasers and magnets, and we even did stem cells. Man, all sorts of stuff. Did microdosing of ketamine in the clinic. Man, all sorts of stuff, and has helped tremendously. I am so much better off than I was when all this went down. Remember, I literally could not handle my newborn child if he would cry, because my noise sensitivity was so bad. The second he fussed too loud or cried, it was like my head was in the Liberty Bell getting rung. With our second born, my wife ended up sleeping out in the living room with our newborn for about 3 months on the couch, so that I could have a good night's sleep in our bed, because sleep is so important. And I'll never forget that. Anyway, very difficult to be a very engaged father when within 10 minutes you're so tanked physically that you can't stand. Within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, when you can't go outside because the sun's too bright and you don't have sunglasses dark enough to block it out. When you don't, still emotional, as you can tell, but that's been one of probably the hardest thing going through this process. When I was younger, I was able to just push through. I mean, it was so normal. I would just push through the pain. I'd push through the symptoms. Had life to live, And then I got older and the symptoms got worse. And my natural tendency was to push through. And I've done it several times, and I've learned over the last 5 years. So I'm kind of getting back on track here, I guess. So we did a couple of years of therapy, the bulk of those trips. And after about 2.5 years, I was like, okay, it's time to go back to work, because I didn't work that whole time. It was just therapy and getting better. I'm like, I think I'm good enough to go back to work, do something. So I was looking at doing some part-time side hustle businesses, things like that. And then I had an opportunity to be a partner in, or build up into partnership in a home care agency. So I took that opportunity and worked my butt off, started working a ton and loved it, but burnt out really fast physically and just kept pushing through. And at about 1.5 years, a little before 1.5 years, 16 months, I think, it was too much. I had started getting some symptoms back. some new symptoms, even like I started blacking out randomly, and I was reluctant to tell anybody. But it happened a few times when I was in the car, and like I'd black out and then like come to with people honking, and like I was at a stoplight, or like on the side of the road. So that was pretty scary. Started having instances where I fell. I would just like all of a sudden it was like I got hit in the head with a brick, and my head would spike and I would just drop to the ground. Or I was like I'd get punched in the face and like throw up against the wall, or get thrown up against the wall. I didn't throw up against the wall, but I got thrown up against the wall and I'd slide down or whatever. And those have been those really scared me and shook me. And the family decided, okay, it's time for you to be done. And what had happened is I had pushed myself, and I think I reconcussed myself a couple of times, which didn't help on top of the workload and working probably too fast, too soon. So I had to step away from that and had to really figure out how to do things differently after that and recover from that that main relapse. And then I'd had some other what I'd call like micro relapses before that that I ignored. So anyway, so it really became clear, and I've tested the waters a couple times, and I've had similar results where not as bad because I've been able to recognize it, but I've had some other micro relapses that I have to be very cautious and I have to be very specific about what I do on my day-to-day basis, and I have to be very careful on how I handle things. But I have to keep moving forward. I have no other choice. I can't just sit down by on the couch and just woe is me. I have to continue moving forward. I have to continue bettering myself. I have to continue getting better because I owe it to my family, to my kids, to have their dad around and active and engaged. So now I get to play with my kids. I get to spend a lot of time with my kids. I'm still not as active with them as I want to be, but I'm so much further along than I was, and I'm so grateful for it. I have now 4 boys who keep us very busy, and we love it. And I get to be a huge part of their life. And I know what my limitations are, and there's times where it's, hey, daddy's head is hammering right now, and right now daddy needs to be in a dark room by himself, or daddy needs to put on the noise canceling headphones, or daddy needs to, go do something different, go nap or whatever. And sometimes it still hits me where like I don't feel comfortable walking because that sensation will hit me, and it's just like, I think I'm going to fall. And sometimes I do, but I keep moving forward. I have to. It's part of why I started Kick the Tiger, for my sake, to keep myself accountable on moving forward and to show other people they can do the same. Yeah, it sucks. And yeah, there's things that we want different, and there's things that we wish weren't so, but we just have to get creative, and we have to figure out what does work for us. And so we can keep moving forward, because there are people counting on us, whether you have a family or not. There's people that count on you and look up to you. I don't remember the number, but we impact, it's something like the average person will touch 10,000 people in their lifetime on average. There's some people that are more, some people that are less, obviously, but on average we'll touch and have relationship on some level with 10,000 people in our lifetime is the statistic. And we'll deeply impact like 500 to 1,000 of them or something like that in a lifetime. That's a lot of people, because if you deeply impact somebody, they deeply impact other people as well. So you're really impacting a lot more than just 500 to 1,000, right? Kind of crazy to think about, but anyway, don't quote me on those numbers, but it's something like that. Anyway, so I have to move forward, even if it's just your own family, your own kids, or your coworker or your team or whatever. You get my point. So that's why I did it, and that's my story. And now we're surging forward with a new purpose, and God has been very faithful to me and to my family, He has given me a fantastic woman that I get to call my wife, and she has been alongside me every step of the way. And I'm so grateful for my wife, Anna, and a fantastic family who's been supportive and helped me, and wonderful kids who really, I honestly don't think I'd be here without them. Because there were times I thought about giving up and didn't, because I knew I had kids, and very grateful for that. So that's my story, and I'm very excited to move forward. Now we've got the Kick the Tiger project. I'm involved in real estate investing with some different people in other parts of the country, and have our routine down on what I need to do on a day-to-day basis, and just moving forward and rebuilding financially, and rebuilding spiritually and mentally and physically, and just keep moving forward, and now we're at a point where we can think of, okay, now how do we impact others? How do others, how can others be inspired, or how can others move forward with their own life by hearing this? So that's the hope. That's the goal. I know this is kind of long. I could probably talk for another hour, but that's the story. That's what I've gone through. That's the story of the head injury and the accident, and what I've gone through and overcome, and still overcoming. And I'm very excited to see what is going to unfold in the future. Our future is so bright. Even with limitations that I have physically, there's so much in store for me and for my family, and just feel very blessed. So, and very, very honored that you're coming with me on this journey. So that's that. Well, you'll hear much more about the story in the future with other content, but that's the basics of it for now. So we'll see you in the other content.